What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Fantasy Football Over Analysis. Today we're talking about the Detroit Lions, their fantasy relevant players, and whether or not we are targeting or fading them in our drafts this summer. At quarterback, Jared Goff, I think, is one of the most underrated, underappreciated players in all of fantasy football. All that Goff does every season is outperform his ADP, finish as a QB1, throw for 4,500 yards, and over 30 touchdowns. Goff has done that in each of the last 4 seasons, finishing as the QB10, the QB7, the QB6, and the QB9. And despite this level of consistency that Goff has given us from a fantasy perspective, he continues to be a little disrespected in the rankings. Every season, he's routinely ranked like QB15 or later, despite the regular top 10 finishes. And same thing this year. Goff right now is coming in as the QB16, which means that he's barely making it in to the top half of the QB2 ranks. And the one thing that Goff does not do well, and I think it's the reason that he gets dropped as low as he does in the rankings, is run the football. He's a zero with his legs. He's not going to give you any kind of rushing floor, which so many fantasy managers value tremendously for the quarterback position. But with Goff, I really don't need him to do anything at all with his legs because his body of work speaks for itself. The thing about Goff, though, is that he's just been so consistent with his passing numbers that I really don't need him to do anything at all with his legs. And with the Lions, first of all, you're talking about one of the most high-powered offenses in the league, and also there's so much consistency here. Goff still has Jahmyr Gibbs, Amon Ra St. Sam LaPorta, Jameson Williams at his skill positions. So this is a group that has played together for such a long time now, and it's very easy for Goff to carry over the success that he's had throwing the football year to year. And it's all in the numbers. Like I said, 4 straight years of finishing inside the top 10 at the quarterback position. And the other thing that makes it easy for not just Jared Goff, but every member of the Lions to deliver these high-end fantasy performances is the amount of games that they play in a dome. And not just the games that they play at home. Altogether, the Lions play 12 games indoors this year. So you have so many factors that just work in Jared Goff's favor. He plays in a good offense, he plays in a dome, he has elite skill position players all around him, and he's got continuity. So you have all these factors that work in Jared Goff's favor, and these are the reasons why he's able to consistently stay as a QB1, as opposed to somebody like, say, Jordan Love or Baker Mayfield, that in recent years they've had spiked seasons where they have finished as QB1s, but then they fall off the year after. That fall off, that regression, that happens because these guys don't have half of the things working in their favor that Jared Goff does. And Jared Goff hasn't lost any of these advantages, so I don't think the result this year for him is going to be any different than what we've seen the last 4 years. So for Jared Goff to be going at the QB16, I think that is just such an outrageous value. He's outstanding for a weight on quarterback build. Also, you can easily get a stack with him and Amon Ra St. if you take him in the first round of your draft. So Jared Goff, while he might not have the ceiling to be the QB1 overall, the consistency that he brings in the high-powered offense that he's in, the fact that he's finished as a QB1 4 straight seasons, this is a guy that I love drafting where he's going. At running back, you don't need me to tell you that Jahmyr Gibbs is an absolute stud at the top of the draft. Gibbs, in the first 3 years of his career, has finished as the RB3, the RB1, and the RB10. In each of his 3 seasons, Gibbs has reached double-digit touchdowns, with 18 total last year, 20 the year before. His reception ceiling is outstanding as well, no less than 52 in any of the 3 years in his career, 77 last season. And yet, somehow, it feels like we still haven't seen the best of Jahmyr Gibbs yet. And this could be the year that the Lions truly unleash Jahmyr Gibbs. David Montgomery, who Gibbs had to share the backfield with in each of his first 3 seasons, is no longer with the team. So Gibbs doesn't have any true competition for work out of the backfield. The only significant move that the Lions made at the position in the offseason was signing former Chiefs starter Isaiah Pacheco to a 1-year deal. And I don't think that Pacheco is a threat to Gibbs' workload in the same way that David Montgomery was. The Lions, over the last couple of years, have just been trending towards giving Gibbs more and more of the backfield work, and I think that their plan this year is to just go fully all in on him. I don't think that they intend at all to give Pacheco a workload even close to what Montgomery was getting. So this is all just going to make Gibbs that much more of a fantastic pick at the top of drafts. He absolutely deserves to be going number 1 overall. And while you could certainly make a case for either him or Bijan with that first overall pick, either way, you're not going to go wrong. You're getting an absolute stud at the top of the draft that is going to anchor your fantasy football team. At wide receiver, Amon Ra St. is just a model of consistency. He's as safe as they come. He's got 3 straight years finishing as the wide receiver 3 overall. 3 straight years with at least 1,200 yards receiving, 3 straight years with at least 115 receptions, and 3 straight years of double-digit touchdowns. I really don't think that there's been enough appreciation for St. Brown and how consistent he's been throughout his career. But he is just a fantastic pick in the middle of the first round, and personally, I would take him over both Puka Nacua and Jackson Smith-Njigba this year. With Puka and JSN, I'm concerned about both of them falling off a little bit after their pinnacle seasons of a year ago. But with St. Brown, the year-to-year consistency just speaks for itself, and it's a pick. And then you have Jameson Williams, who last season finishes as a wide receiver 1 for the first time in his career. And with Williams, it was a tale of 2 halves of the season. The second half of the season in which Dan Campbell took over the play calling and required that Williams be much more integrated into the offense than he was during the first 8 weeks of the season really made a huge difference. Williams, the first 8 weeks of the season, had 5 games where he was below 10 fantasy points, and then in the second half, from week 9 on, he only had 2 games where he was below 10 fantasy points. And Williams' usage in the second half of the year showed that he can be more than just a big play guy. There is a world where Jameson Williams can have a weekly floor for this offense. Now, whether or not that carries over to this season remains to be seen. The Lions did hire a new offensive coordinator, Drew Petzing, who last season with the Cardinals just made it a point to feed Trey McBride. So maybe the Lions this season end up using more of Sam LaPorta, and if they do that, then it's most likely that Jameson Williams is going to be the one that suffers. But the thing to keep in mind is that obviously Dan Campbell is still the head coach, and Campbell was the one who really made it a point to advocate for Williams' involvement in the offense during the second half of last season. And I don't think that Campbell is just going to let Williams not be used like he was in the first half of last season again. So Williams, coming in as the wide receiver 27, is pretty fairly priced. I do think you still have to be concerned about his history of disappearing, but I do think some of that is baked into his ADP right now. And while I would still feel a little dicey about rolling Jameson Williams out as my wide receiver 2 in a 12-team format with only 1 flex, I feel a lot more comfortable with the idea of doing that than I have in previous seasons. And while ideally I would want Jameson Williams to be my flex before my wide receiver 2, I would still take him over the guys that he's going around, the DJ Moores, Rome Odunze, Christian Watson. I would take him over those guys in a heartbeat. And then at tight end, you have Sam LaPorta. LaPorta, who finished as the tight end 1 in his rookie year, and it's just been all downhill since then. Last season, LaPorta only plays in 9 games before missing the rest of the season with a back injury that he's still not 100% recovered from, though he was cleared for training camp. And with LaPorta, he's still being drafted as a mid-tier tight end, going as the tight end 8. I think the best thing that's working for LaPorta in his favor this year is the arrival of Drew Petzing, who, as I mentioned before, just made it a point to feed Trey McBride last season. So if any of that carries over to the Lions, then LaPorta is going to have maybe the best year that he's had since his rookie season. Combine that with the fact that, let's be honest, Sam LaPorta is due for some positive regression after 2 down years. So I myself don't get a lot of LaPorta, but I don't mind the idea of drafting him as a mid-tier tight end. I do think he has a path to a much higher finish than where he's going this season. But I do think that some of the same problems that we've seen for LaPorta over the last few years, mainly having to do with all the target competition in Detroit between St. Brown, Jameson Williams, and Jahmyr Gibbs also being there, is still very much a factor for him. And that's going to do it for this one, guys. So the Detroit Lions are just one of the most fun teams that you can possibly have exposure to for fantasy football, whether it's through Jahmyr Gibbs or Amon Ra St. in round 1, whether it's through Jared Goff as a late round quarterback, or Jameson Williams as your wide receiver 2 or wide receiver 3, or even Sam LaPorta as a mid-tier tight end option. There's just so many appealing ways that you can get exposure to them. This is going to be one of the best offenses in the league again. They're going to be involved in a lot of shootouts, and they're going to play in a lot of dome games. There's not a lot here that's not to like. But I thank you guys so much for watching, and we will talk to you next time when we go over the New York Giants.